so we just got done with a great ride. So I thought I would do a Q&A. I asked you guys what questions you wanted me to answer on Instagram. I got a good mix of both personal questions and like training questions. So I'm gonna flip-flop between both of those. Just FYI, I'm not a professional trainer. What I share on my YouTube channel is basically just things I've learned throughout the years and things that I find help me when I'm working with my horses. So I will give you the best advice I can on what I would do, but it's always great to work with an instructor who can help you through these things as well. I just want to plug Kong Equine here, so that's what this lovely thing is. This is a Kong Equine horse toy, and as you can see, Tucker absolutely loves this toy, and I put it out here so he would be entertained and stay in the shot while I do this Q&A. If you have a horse that gets bored easily, if they're in their stall, or maybe a little stressed out, I highly recommend trying out one of these toys. So a while ago, Tucker had to go out in a pasture by himself for a little bit. And so I started putting this toy out there in this field for him just so he'd have something to do throughout the day since he didn't have another horse. And man, he would play with this thing all day. I would sit and watch him and it was hilarious. So if you're looking for some way to entertain your horse, I highly recommend getting one of these things. Okay. First question, would you buy another horse right now? So my direct answer to that is no, not right now, this exact moment. And the reason for this is because I just feel like I don't have time to commit to another horse. Right now I do consider YouTube a job, but I still have another job outside of this. And I really love that job and I don't want to give it up. So my schedule right now is a little shorter than I want it to be when it comes to being at the barn. And if I were to get another horse, you know, I want to make sure that Tucker would still get the same amount of time and attention that he gets now. So for me to get another horse, I would really just need to change my schedule and have the time to work with one. I especially want to get like a young unbroke horse that I can bring along. And so just right now, I wouldn't have the time to be consistent with that. I want to say I will get another horse eventually. That is my goal. But right now, I just like hanging out with Tucker and I like my schedule and I like how things are. So we'll just see what happens. Okay, here's a question. How common is it to get thrown off and how dangerous is it? Falling off is a normal part of horseback riding. Like, it's gonna happen eventually to anyone. In terms of how often you fall off, that really just depends on the situation, the rider, and the horse, I would say. I remember one time when I was younger, there was like a week where I fell off like 5 times. But that's just, you know, bad riding on my part. And I was also riding horses that were a little bit more challenging for me, and I really didn't know how to handle. In terms of falling off a lot, it's always a risk that's gonna be there. Really, if you're afraid to fall off, you need to make sure that you're riding a horse that suits your level of riding. In terms of how dangerous falling off is, that's the risk that comes with horseback riding. It is dangerous. I mean, there are things you can do to keep yourself safer if you were to fall, like always wear a helmet when you ride. That is a huge deal. Because whenever I fall off, for whatever reason, it seems like I always fall on my head. Luckily, every time I've fallen off, I've had a helmet on. Another thing you can do if you feel really insecure is wear like a safety vest, and those could help kind of soften the blow and the trauma if you were to fall off. The danger is always going to be there. Unfortunately, you do hear horror stories, but that shouldn't scare you out of riding. You know, I love riding and it's so fun and the risk to me is worth it, but I'm also going to be safe and be smart and not do anything stupid that could make me fall off. All right, next question. What was the first horse you ever rode? That was a really long time ago. So I started riding when I was 7. And I think the first lesson pony I ever rode was a little gray pony named Jemima, but I really don't know what her breed was. Probably just some little Welsh pony. But I do remember her very clearly. I thought she was massive, but then I was looking at pictures of her, like pictures of my first lesson the other day. I'm like, man, that was a cute little pony. I think that was the first horse I rode as a lesson horse. Here's a question. I'm bringing my horse home next year. How do I help him make a smooth transition? This is a great question because I feel like when you bring a new horse home, it can be very stressful for the horse. Number one, they're being moved out of a herd and out of a place that they feel comfortable with, and now they're being placed into a new herd and a new place with different people and different surroundings and different horses. And so that can be very stressful on them. As prey animals, they like to stick with, you know, other horses, and especially other horses they know that has their back. Another thing is transporting. So if you're transporting a horse, it really just depends how far you're transporting them, but that can be very hard on their bodies. I remember Tucker here, when I moved him from Oklahoma, that's like 1,500 miles almost, and it took him about 3 or 4 months to get his muscle back and to get his weight back after traveling, because he traveled for 3 days, and that's just a lot of stress on the horse's body. Oh. In terms of making it a smooth transition for the horse, I would really say just giving them time to acclimate. As much as I would love to just jump on a new horse I get, I wouldn't do that, because I want to give them time to just chill out in their pasture and their field and get used to everything. If you're putting that unnecessary stress of like, okay, you just moved here, now it's time to work, that can make it even more stressful for them. And I will say this, something I've noticed a few times when horses have come in and they're new horses, is that it seems like in the beginning they may have behavior problems, and then after a while they just chill back out and then they're fine. And so I really think like that transition may bring out these bad behaviors that you wouldn't think the horse would have. So if that's the case, I would just say stick with them. They're in the middle of transition, and so I would hope eventually that behavior would go away. Another thing you can do to help make it a smooth transition is talk to the previous owner to see what kind of food your horse needs and special attention. Because if the horse is used to a certain type of feed and maybe a certain type of living arrangement, when you change that up on them, that's going to be hard. I know when you change a horse's feed, that's going to be stressful on their body. If you change a horse's living situation, like if a horse is used to being in the stall half a day and having a nice fan on them, and then they go and they have to stand out in a hot field, they may get a little peeved off. Someone asks, can you ride Western at all? That is a great question. I love Western. I used to have a Western saddle and I'd ride in it all the time, but then it just got too small for Tucker when he muscled out. It was too tight on him. So I had to get rid of it, and I just haven't gotten one since. But I do love Western. Oh my gosh, horse. I love some of the disciplines of Western. Like, I would love to try cutting. That's like my ultimate goal. I love watching the cutting tournaments. I just find that I really like a lot of the Western training in terms of like a soft horse, but they move well off your leg and all stuff like that. I mean, that's in the English world too, but I just think it seems more prevalent in the Western world. So I do ride Western. I don't ride in a certain discipline. I would just ride in a Western saddle. But like I said, I would love to learn more about Western and maybe try out some disciplines. And I think Tucker here would be great at cutting. How to become more confident when you don't have anyone else to ride with? So this is a great question, because having someone to ride with can help you feel more confident in a lot of ways. I know, like going out trail riding, a lot of people rather be with someone than by themselves, just in case something happens, or maybe because their horse feels more comfortable with another horse. And then you can also be each other's accountability, like put your heels down, make sure you look up, and stuff like that. When it comes to building confidence, when you don't have someone to ride with, I mean, I struggled with this too, in a sense. When I lived in Oklahoma, I mean, there were people to ride with, but for a lot of the time I did ride out by myself. In the beginning, stick to what you're comfortable with. Like if you're comfortable riding your horse by yourself in the arena, then start there. And then gradually work to where you're on the trails, and just giving yourself fun stuff to do with your horse so you and your horse get to know each other better. Just do fun stuff that you find fun too, so you're not so focused on, I don't have someone with me, what if I do something wrong, what if something bad happens? Another great thing is if you don't find yourself confident because you don't have anyone to ride with, or maybe you just don't really feel like you trust your horse completely, I highly recommend groundwork and just working with your horse like that and starting there. So if I just start doing groundwork with my horse out in the field or something, and I can tell that they're getting really confident out there, then I'm gonna feel more confident to get on and ride. I will say this, it's always important to try and have someone around when you're riding, or carry your cell phone or something, just in case something does happen, you can easily contact someone else. Someone asked me, what are your plans for this year? And that is a great question. In terms of working with Tucker, I would say we just have a bunch of kind of fun goals. I have a goal of I want to teach him how to fetch, so we've been working on that and he's doing pretty good. I just want to work on getting him more sensitive, more to my seat and leg. I've been riding a lot with just a neck rope and working on that already, and he's doing really well. I just want to see him kind of move up to the next level. In terms of YouTube, I feel like I just want to keep making helpful and engaging content and also entertaining content. I feel like that's what my niche is. And that would be another reason to get another horse, is because I know that a lot of you ask to see what I show you with Tucker. You ask to see that with a younger horse that doesn't maybe understand what I'm asking them. That would be kind of the reason for getting another horse. So that is a goal. Maybe not for this year, but next year. But just, you know, helping you all and giving you guys more pieces that you can take and then bring to work with your horse on. So I'm constantly looking for those ideas. So if you do have any ideas or certain questions that you want to see me do in a video, just comment down below. Here's a question. How did you get into working with horses? I just remember from the time, as far back as I can remember, I've loved horses, even though like I'd never seen one before, which is funny to me. But I just felt like I wanted to ride horses, so my parents got me riding lessons. In terms of wanting to work with them and train and stuff like that, that really happened after I got my first horse, Pepper. So Pepper was a handful, and for the first 2 years I had her, I feel like I just learned a lot about dealing with a horse that was a little bit more difficult. So after 2 years, I was like, well, maybe I should experiment with this a little more. So then I got a project pony named Bella, and y'all have seen Bella in videos. And then from there, it's just kind of stemmed into something I love to do. And I love to research new training techniques and new things to train my horse. Like with the Liberty stuff and the trick training and all that. Tucker's the first horse I've done that with. I just found it and it's interesting to me. So I research it and then I come and try it out on him. When I feel like I'm accumulating knowledge, I want to learn more and then I want to try more and do more. That's kind of where I feel like my passion for training has come from. This person asks, how do you deal with a young horse under 1 year old, preferably, feeding and training specifically? So that's a great question. And I've worked with a few yearlings, actually, they were yearlings, just doing like groundwork training and working on the ground manners and stuff like that. And I think that's a great question to ask because many people think that you can treat a young horse just like you can treat a mature horse when it comes to training, but that's not really the case. So in the training aspect of working with a young horse, I feel like the most important thing is limiting your training sessions to like 10 or 15 minutes just because they're like kids, like their attention span is so short. And so pick one thing to focus on, and as soon as they start to understand the concept, you can just be done for the day and reward them. So that gets them used to working with humans, but it also is going to show them that working with humans isn't a bad and stressful and exhausting thing. In terms of what to work with them on, I would just say the biggest thing is getting them used to human interaction, like touch, picking up their feet, petting them, petting all over, leading, tying. And then I would start on basic groundwork, like maybe just teaching them to lunge and then disengage their hind end, move their front end, and just those manners where you're establishing respect for the human. It's easy to work with a young horse where, you know, they're not as big and they're not going to be as pushy compared to when they're adults and they're big, and then it can get a little bit more dangerous. When it comes to feeding young horses, the best thing you could probably do is just talk to your veterinarian and see what they say. And they can give you good advice about like the best kind of food to give them. If there's like a grain that can help them develop, what kind of grain is that? I will say I'm not one to feed grain just because it's usually high in sugars that I don't think my horses need. But in terms of like a developing horse where like they're burning a lot of energy because they're growing, that may be something where you do need to supplement their diet with more sugars and more nutrients. So that's something you'll need to talk to your vet about. How old was Tucker when you first got him? Tucker was 4 or 5 when I got him, and I think he's probably about 9 years old now. His Coggins says he's 9, but he may be like 9 or 10. So I've had him like 5 years, which is a long time, and he's a good boy. So I got Tucker out in Oklahoma, and in the beginning, he was just a project pony. I didn't really think I would keep him. I thought I would just train him and then sell him. Can you get that carrot? There you go. How can you resist this cute little horse trying to get his carrot? And he just turned out to be such a perfect pony. I mean, I will say he is very quirky about stuff, but he is awesome. He's so trainable and willing and kind and cute and friendly. When you buy a horse, how do you know what food and equipment they need? This is a great question, and I know that this can be stressful because equipment's expensive and grain is confusing. You're gonna need to do a few things, I feel like, to kind of get this. Number one, ask the previous owners what food they gave your horse. This doesn't mean they were feeding them the right thing, but this may kind of help you understand the diet that the horse already has. Number two, I would talk to a vet about that, and I know I keep saying it, but I say it because it's important. So a vet will look at your horse and give them a body count number, which means like in terms of health, where they're at. A 1 would be like a really skinny horse that's malnourished, while a 9 is going to be a fat, obese horse. Two different horses need two different things. So your vet will be able to tell you which thing the horse needs. So if you have a really thin horse that needs to keep weight on them, you know, they may recommend that you feed them certain hay like alfalfa and stuff like that. They may also recommend that you feed them a high sugar grain so that they can keep their weight. With an obese horse, they may say, well, that horse don't need any grain. In terms of equipment, that's a whole other ball game, which can be annoying because if you already own a saddle and then you get a new horse and your saddle doesn't fit the horse, that's frustrating. It's important that your horse does have a saddle that fits them. Otherwise, they're gonna get really sore in their back. So I will say, Tucker here, he's outgrown 2 saddles that I have gotten for him. I had an English saddle for him and I also had a Western saddle, and he outgrew both of them because he bulked up so much between the age from like 5 to 6. He gained so much muscle. For a long time, his hind end was so sore, and I was like, well, what's the problem? I didn't think it was his saddle because it was his hind end that was bugging him. But after a while, like, I switched my saddle and I got a bigger saddle, a wider saddle, and all of a sudden his hind end was fine and he hasn't had any problems since then. A saddle that doesn't fit your horse can really affect your horse, so it's very important that you do find one that fits them. In terms of measuring your horse for a saddle, I actually have a video on how to measure the gullet of your horse to find the width of the saddle you need. So I'll put the link to that video in the description. In terms of if you're getting your first horse and you want to know exactly what you need to care for them, I do have a video all about caring for your horse and their specific needs. And so I'll put a link to that video in the description as well so you can check that out. I love this question because my mind has changed about it so much. It says to treat or not to treat, which is funny. Do you give your horse treats or do you not give your horse treats? So I understand both sides of this argument, because if you give your horse treats all the time, they can get pushy and rude and in your space. Whereas when you also give your horse treats, that's a great way to reward them. They're food driven, obviously. Look at Tucker here. You know, they're animals, so they love food, and food to them is a great reward. So for the longest time, I had such a problem with giving your horse treats all the time, or maybe even like the positive reinforcement training when you use a clicker and then give them a treat. Just because I'm like, oh, the horse isn't responding because they respect you, they're responding because they want the food. But I will say, I have been researching the positive reinforcement training now, and my mind has completely changed about it. Because, I mean, like I mentioned, they're animals, they're driven by food. And I've learned that actually feeding your horse is a great way for them to positively associate you. And this is just common sense. I mean, when I feed my horse will then meet me at the gate every day because they know, oh, this is the lady who feeds me. And food is a great motivator for animals, and it's a great way to show them what behaviors are correct. So like with the clicker training, you know, you'll use the click to mark a behavior and then you give the horse a treat, so then they associate that behavior with a reward and positive reinforcement and stuff like that. And so I think that using food can be very beneficial. I think you need to do it in the right way so that your horse isn't going to be rude and running over you. Because, you know, I've seen both ways. Like Bella, oh my gosh, that pony is super pushy and super rude when it comes to food. So I don't really feed her treats when I'm around. I'll give her a treat like in a bucket or something, just so she will say, oh, the food is in the bucket, the food's not in my hand. And she is probably one, to be honest, I wouldn't try positive reinforcement training with, just because she is extremely rude when it comes to food. I would have to work with her a lot on that before I even tried that training. All right, guys, so that is all the questions we have for today. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate all of your support. Please be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more weekly horse videos.